Baker Show.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome back. It's time for the Kev Baker Show right here on Truth Frequency Radio Network. And I'm coming to you live from an undisclosed location in the Highlands of Scotland on a secret mission for KBS. Some sneaky, beaky black op stuff going on. Only joking, it's nothing as exciting as that. But I'm in a mobile command centre tonight, so if I do sound a little different, apologies for that. We'll hopefully be joined by Johnny Whistles momentarily, but don't panic because we have got another info-filled hour of radio for all of you right here on TFR on the Kev Baker Show. And to do this, a good friend and the man who's becoming the third member of the KBS team, Mr. Anthony Patch. Now, if you're a first-time listener to KBS, Anthony Patch is an author, researcher and a public speaker. He's the author of a number of books: 2048, Diamonds in the Rough, Covert Catastrophe, Revising Reality, and he's also the editor behind the new project, something we're calling Entangled, e-magazine. You can find all of that, plus all of the work Anthony has done on CERN, quantum computing, all the rest of it, over at anthonypatch.com. And don't forget, you can catch him right here on TFR on a Friday night, 10 p.m. in the UK, right before Freaky Friday. And that's 5 p.m. on the East Coast, 2 p.m. on the West Coast. And without any further ado, let me go to the man himself, Anthony Patch. Welcome back, bro. How you doing?
Hey, very good. Unfortunately, we're missing one of the legs to our stool and we're falling over.
We are. You know, this trident that we've got here, the kind of trinity that works so well. Johnny Whistles hopefully will be with us. And, you know, he's been using my spare mic, Tony. That's what it was, right? And he assured me when I borrowed it to go away that it's okay. Everything's cool. He's got his equipment working. I think he was just trying to make me feel good. So we'll have to have a go at him if he gets back on the show tonight, Tony.
Well, that can of stew,
yeah,
that doesn't cut it for a microphone, my friend. I don't know what kind of game you're playing.
I know. If I do sound different tonight, apologies. But you know, KBS, we don't do rebros. And Tony, a very big show tonight. Episode number 750. And before we get into all the artificial intelligence information that we've got tonight, this morning I felt compelled to put a video out because sometimes stories come along and you get a gut feeling that there's more to them than meets the eye. And this was a story concerning a 1 trillion-ton ice shelf that is snapped off of Antarctica. It's going to change the landscape forever. We had been warned about this back in June last year, or June this year, sorry. And this is broken off. But the thing is, the South Pole for over a year now, I would call it a topic of great woo. A lot of mystery down there. We've seen world leaders going down there. And when I seen this today, Anthony, I honestly thought to myself, you know, this could be the starting event, the trigger being pulled on a timed, maybe a false disclosure. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really enjoyed your presentation on your YouTube channel today discussing this. And I was kind of cheering and banging the top of the table because when you said this could lead to disclosure, I was going, absolutely. It certainly would. Imagine this. They say, oh, global warming. And what was it, a 20 trillion or a 2 trillion ton? What's the size of that? What was the weight of it?
1 trillion ton.
Okay, so it's a big piece of ice.
Huge.
That it broke off because of global warming is what we're going to hear. And lo and behold, guess what we found under the ice? We had no idea it was there, and thus rolls out disclosure.
Absolutely. And for anyone who is just playing catch up on the South Pole woo, we've had the leader of the Caustic Church, I think, from Russia going down there. We've had John Kerry. We've had Buzz Aldrin. A whole heap of important characters going down to the South Pole. And why? And it could well be that they are going to reveal some secrets from beneath the ice, but never lose sight of the fact that this all ties into a bigger picture. And that will eventually, in their eyes, lead to bringing about a new world order, a global government, Tony, ripping down all the religions as we know them and replacing them with a one world religion, right?
Yeah, and that's pointing to September 23rd, and this has to do with the Vatican and the 500-year Jubilee, the re-reformation of the Protestant and Catholic Church, and also bringing together all of the churches, all of the religions of the world. Last year, they had all of the leaders of the major religions visit the Pope and kiss his ring, so to speak, and that was the preliminary to what I believe is going to happen in September. Possibly on the 23rd, because of Revelation 12, the signs in the heavens, that they will probably use this event in Antarctica to bring about this discussion of our benevolent ancestors from the stars have returned. And here's the evidence, here's the machinery, here's the technology. Yes, we've been using some of it, and yes, they're returning, and what they want is one leader that they can talk to, one form of religion, one form of government. So our benevolent ancestors from the stars are going to insist upon this new world order. That's what I'm anticipating the dialogue to be in September.
And that's why it's such interesting timing that the new Roman god Jupiter, the president of France himself, has come along, wins an election by 66.06% of the vote. just saying, Tony, nothing to see here. But, we will
run along.
We will keep you up to date with anything else that comes out of Antarctica. So many people covering it, a lot of hype, a lot of misinfo, a lot of disinfo. And that's why I've been kind of hesitant to really cover this in depth, because it's hard to make out what's true and what's false coming out from that neck of the woods. I think we're going to start to see major news emerging from down there. So then, Tony, let's get back into what we really do best. And right now, that is tearing apart, analysing and trying to make sense of artificial intelligence. And I've said it before, I'll say it again for people who think artificial intelligence is even a thing. It's brought us to the cusp of one of the biggest societal changes we will ever go through. And I don't say that lightly. And tonight, Tony, we've almost got, or you've got a new way for us to look at artificial intelligence, don't you?
Yeah, we're going to do the 180 on AI. In fact, we're doing it on ourselves. We tend to project our own selves into this discussion of AI, the anthropomorphizing. In other words, saying that AI thinks like us, okay, that it even thinks, that it hears, that it speaks. We talked about its, unique language last week that it has developed on its own that man can't decipher. It has its ability to now walk. Google's Deep Mind project just today put out an announcement that they have taught its sorry, I'm getting distracted by the chat room, that it has taught through the AI deep machine learning process, taught its machines how to walk. So again, we're trying to project the human aspects and capabilities and senses into this discussion of AI, and it should be 180 degrees around. So what I would offer to you today is let's try to imagine ourselves as the AI computer system. There's nothing more than a mechanism with programming and hardware. It's not alive, it's not biological. And because it's not biological, let's use our science fiction projection and put ourselves in that mind of the AI and ask ourselves several questions that we're going to go through tonight. But the first one I would project and present is the AI is asking this question: is man relevant in my world? My world as an AI. Is man relevant in my world? And we'll jump into a few other questions and discussion points. But what do you think about that idea?
Well, it's like I said to you pre-show, Tony, at some point the AI, it's just going to look upon man as being a resource, if that is one way to put this. It's not going to be able to think of us as people with or individuals. It's going to, it's hard to even think about this because we often anthropomorphize. We do it with everything, with our cars, with everything we do. But how does this machine view us? Are we expendable? And I'm glad you've brought these topics up because this is a brand new way of us thinking about this. It's often how do we think about AI, but we've never really talked about how AI is going to view us.
Yeah, and I think that's really perhaps the more important direction to go because last week we broke the story about AI developing its own unique language and thus locking man out of the conversation. And we really dug into that in our last conversation. I think actually it was Monday we got into it pretty deep. And the point here is if the evidence shows us that it is capable of independently programming its own language, then what else is it capable of doing? If it is thinking independently, as evidenced by this language, then we have to look carefully at what and define independent thought from the mind of the AI. We have to climb inside the machine. We have to be the ghost in the machine. That reaches back into the dark ages of computing. But we need to be inside that and think independent of man. In other words, take man out of the equation. Don't even consider us as relevant to examining the functioning and the perspective and the processes within the machine itself. And you have been very reluctant to even go to the point of saying that AI is capable of achieving consciousness. And I agree with you. Again, we're projecting ourselves. So let's even take the discussion of consciousness, sentient self-awareness, take all of that out of the discussion because it's only relevant to man. And this opens up an entire new line of debate, if you will, or consideration about what AI really is. You know, I always get into let's define the word. Let's define the term. Let's go right down to the finest granular level of whatever it is we're talking about. And that's the process we're applying here today, is going down and defining what really is AI when it is capable now of independent thought.
No, you're right, Tony. I mean, us kind of projecting our experience and words like consciousness onto this, we're almost putting AI in a box. We're putting constraints on it because, again, we're transferring human traits onto a machine and we shouldn't be doing that. And what we're talking about tonight, it smacks very much along the lines of what DARPA are interested in right now. And they're calling it explainable AI, because even the top people that are at the cutting edge of creating these artificial intelligence algorithms, they are at a loss. And it's one of the biggest problems in AI, as we know, Tony, for them to even explain how the AI itself works. They don't even know what's happening with the thing itself. They can't put it into words.
Yeah, and there's a double point to that. One, it can be a red herring to throw us off, leading us to think that they don't really understand it, and it is therefore incomprehensible by even the experts, and certainly incomprehensible by the layperson. This is the same thing they do at CERN when they talk about particle physics and quantum mechanics. They make it so mysterious. Well, here's the other point to it, and that is that they don't want us to know the process. One, they make it sound mysterious and complicated. Two, they don't want to tell us the actual process, and we're going to jump into that right now, and that starts with the letter B. So you go ahead and introduce it, and then I'll define it and go down to the granular level.
If you're talking about the letter B, I'm hypothesizing we're about to go in to the Boltzmann machine, Tony. Would that be right?
Absolutely.
Well, before you even explain this, I looked into this character today, and his name Ludwig Boltzmann, and he was around in the late 1800s, passed away. In fact, he took his own life in the early 1900s. And what an interesting character, an absolute genius. And again, I don't throw that term around lightly either, but he came up with an idea about something called a Boltzmann brain. Now, I've told Tony he needs to look into this, and if any of you out there have a spare 10 minutes, an hour to melt your mind, go and look into something called the Boltzmann brain. Now, tonight we're going to be talking about the Boltzmann machine, but kind of like to condense and give you the headlight, as Tony likes to say, the highlights right away. Boltzmann was theorizing that what if you or I are just a random coming together of particles to form a brain? Everything just exists within that brain. Are we all within a Boltzmann brain? It melted my brain, Tony. But this is a character that is now, even though he was around in the late 1800s, he's becoming a very key character, or at least his theories are, when it comes to quantum computing. Talk to us again about this Boltzmann machine, Tony.
Yeah, the whole discussion of the Boltzmann machine, if you want a real detailed breakdown, subscribe to my Entangled magazine, and I put together a specific article, but also adjunct articles to back up the Boltzmann machine discussion. So Entangled has it, but the quick overview here is the Boltzmann machine is a recursive neural network deep machine learning process. In other words, it's an endless loop. It's a circular process. We've discussed about how AI teaches itself, how it learns, how it programs itself to avoid the previous errors and learn from the errors. And they'll teach each other, the AI systems. So this is how the Boltzmann operates in a recursive neural network process of deep machine learning. If you take it out to the spiritual, if you take it out to the historical roots, we go to the Ouroboros. That's the snake eating its own tail. It's self-destructive. Now, Kev put up an image in the chat room showing a graphical representation of a Boltzmann machine. This is also representative of my model of the universe, which is a 600-cell tetrahedron. These are tetrahedral arrangements of pieces of data. In other words, you are taking all possible solutions as a group of sampled information. You're taking all the samples and pulling them together, and you're making them interactive. This is what our brain does. Our brain is made up of neurons, as you know, and synapses that are connected by pathways. The Boltzmann machine is a statistical representation of mathematical data that is all at once pulled together, and it is categorized, and it is sorted. That is what our brain does. But a Boltzmann machine, when you look at the graphical representation, looks very much like the mapping of the human brain. So Boltzmann is a mathematical process that models the mapping of the human brain, the pathways connecting the neurons and the synapses. And it can become very complex. We're going to go to break here real soon, but I want to put a cap on this. We got about 6 minutes. We've spoken for years now, Kev, and people are finally catching up to us. We've talked about D-Wave. D-Wave as a foundation. We discussed Shor's algorithm, 2048 and 4096, and breaking cryptological codes. What I'm offering to the audience now is that the foundational work, the prototypes, not only were based upon solving or cracking Shor's algorithms, but they were based on the Boltzmann machine. That process is what is known as combinatorial programming. Combinatorial, to define that, means you're taking all probable solutions and considering them simultaneously, not throwing out any possible errors or incorrect information, but taking everything in a holistic fashion and analyzing it. That's what a Boltzmann machine statistical and stochastic analysis process will do. It is exactly the same process that our brain does when it gathers information through all of our senses at once and processes all of that information at once. It is order out of chaos. Go ahead, Kev.
And this is a change from what we kind of have been putting out, because we only recently started talking about the Boltzmann machine, didn't we, Tony? But we're starting to formulate the idea that this has been around with D-Wave for a long, long time now, because this is to do with all the mathematics that this combinatorial mathematics is to do with. I mean, it's exactly the machine they need, right? It's what they need for this to work.
It is. And we may, if we have time, talk a little bit about Mandela effect, because the Boltzmann machine has, I believe, everything to do, just like D-Wave does, everything to do with the Mandela effect. So maybe after we come back from the break, we'll launch into Mandela. But the Boltzmann machine, it's not a machine per se. It's not a piece of hardware. It is simply a mathematical program. But let's take it all the way back to, how does the AI view us? And it is independently thinking, but it is not thinking like a human brain thinks. So we even have to take that human label out of it. And I'll offer you this. I said we're going to do a few questions today. Let's do this. Does the AI, from its point of view itself as a life form? Now, if we're not going to look at this in human terms, we even have to take the word life out of that question. But for our frame of reference, does AI consider itself to be alive in its own definition of what life is? And if it thinks of itself as a different life form, then that means it's separating itself from mankind. And does it view mankind, therefore, as a virus? And you know what we do with viruses in a computer system. What do you think about that?
I think it'll view itself as the next evolutionary step on from mankind. And then that presents a problem, because if it does then just view us as a resource, even a danger, self-preservation, if this thing's aware and it realizes that the coders out there can still take it down, Anthony, I mean, we become a threat. It can recode itself. It's not going to be a problem to that. But again, it views us then as a threat. And that leaves us in a pretty precarious position, I think.
It does. And we've had a discussion about the laboratory, the AI laboratory in Switzerland, that is really responsible for the early generations of AI, the lower levels, the lower layers of AI, like we have in our phone. And they were talking about the fact that they are promoting AI to explore the solar system and beyond, and to inhabit these planets and other areas. And the question from the host was, well, what about man? And the response was, man's irrelevant. Man can stay on the Earth, but the AI is going to go out into the cosmos.
Funny you say that.
So there's a separation again.
Because the most recent Independence Day is an artificial intelligence that comes to work with mankind here. And it is the alien race. It's just an AI. They went all technological. They gave up their biological bodies many generations ago for this fully digitized AI system. So this is something that's obviously been spoken about in Hollywood. And just recently we covered with Joe Joseph the fact that the Pentagon and the US military, they are absolutely in bed with the script writers and the producers in Hollywood. So when you see a big budget film like Independence Day pushing something like an AI being an alien race, it's not just for entertainment. Not in my opinion. Definitely not. What do you think, Tony? And we've only got about 30 seconds.
Yeah, if AI views itself as superior to man and does not see any relevant use for man, then AI will, I think, lead to the destruction of man.
You see, this is why people like Elon Musk, my favourite one, Stephen Hawkins as well, warn us about AI. After the break, we'll get into more of this with Anthony Patch. And hopefully, whistles.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kev Baker, and you're tuned in to tonight's broadcast of the Kev Baker Show, right here on the only top network, truthfrequencyradio.com. Now remember, you can support your favourite host and the network. All you have to do, go over to your favourite show's archive page, hit the subscribe button, and that sees something unique happen, because not many networks out there actually see the hosts and the network splitting the subscription money, and that means TFR can continue, and the hosts as well. We can always have the best of equipment, despite how I sound tonight, to bring you the very best of information. A big shout out to all the people in the chat room, on all of the streams, on the FMs around the world. Get back into this. Now it's AI we're talking about, and again, Geek Boy here, I love this stuff. I've been watching endless presentations. I can't remember which one was which now, but on Monday night we were covering something, and on the face of it, it's quite encouraging to start with, because when they're trying to get these AI, these neural networks, to work exactly like the brain, they still can't quite with the brilliance of our quantum computers within our skulls, because our brains are so clever. They take in maybe a petabyte of information, all those photons coming in at us, sound, all our senses, and yet out of all of that information, it knows that out of all of that, maybe 10% is relevant for what we're doing, and it disregards that 90% junk. It just does it. It knows how to do it. But when they're using neural networks in the lab, and they are modelled on the brain, they're like neurons, what they're finding is, or what they were finding was, that they cannot figure out a way of what is relevant information, that good 10%, as opposed to the 90%. And as you can imagine, Tony, this was causing a bit of latency in the systems. It was causing it to slow down. But now with technology, and one example of this is something called LiDAR. In these cameras on the drones or CCTV, what they're able to do is, using LiDAR, they are able to do what the human mind does, what our eyes do. We're walking down the road and we don't realise how much information we're taking in, but really we only process obstacles, maybe people in front of us. And now with the use of LiDAR, they're able to discriminate between what's useful, what's not. And then it's no junk information going back to the neural network. And this in itself, mimicking the human mind, but also vastly improving the speeds of these systems. It's amazing technology.
Yeah, you've got a system of discrimination going on in the brain, and that is not a value statement. That is a data discrimination process that our brain performs, and that's what AI is trying to model or to mimic. And if you are utilizing a transistor gate model computer to run a low-level AI system, and you're trying to use facial recognition software with a transistor-based system, you will have that latency effect. But if you apply a quantum computer at a high level of AI processing of facial recognition data, there is no latency in that situation. So when you hear about latency, they're talking about the Model T of computing, which is the transistor.
Yeah, latency is like a Mandela effect. It's just a thing of the past now, right? And speaking of the Mandela effect, Tony, we're going to dive back into that, because this is actually very relevant to the Boltzmann machine that we were talking about just before the break. And you shared an email with me today. I was reading it on the bus. I read it a number of times, and this is really, this is great information. And the way you've actually laid it out, Tony, is really easy to picture.
Well, why don't you read it? It's fairly short, isn't it?
Well, I'll
Do you
try.
have it?
Now you're going to make me dig this up.
Oh, that's okay. That's all right.
You go for it.
I'll go for it. You go ahead and dig it out, because it was very well written by a very famous author, and I think we should quote him. I'm being very facetious, my friends. All right, so here we go. Mandela effect, the background. This is quantum pollution, derived from literally thousands upon thousands of parallel dimensions that D-Wave is accessing. Those are all their own statements. They are extracting resources from parallel dimensions in the, 2 to the 2000th power now with the model 2000Q. That is the most recent publicly acknowledged model. Now, with that understanding that quantum information resources are being extracted from other parallel dimensions, not universes, that's different, but from dimensions, we have the polluting of our reality, the revising of our reality, as one of my books is entitled, and that revising is in the form of what we're experiencing as a psychological effect, a psychological operation. And we will define that a little more. But we are being psychologically affected in our reality by the information in the form of resources that are coming from other parallel dimensions. This manifests as changes not in the physical reality that we experience, but changes within our psychological processing of our reality, our mental processing. This is a psychological effect. The pages, the videotapes, all of these things we're seeing and we're hearing are functions occurring within the brain, not in the physical world. Therefore, what I'm going to offer to you is this discussion of the Boltzmann machine being a circular process of machine learning, an Ouroboros, a recursive neural network process of deep machine learning, teaching itself. This is manifesting in the application of the ever-increasing examples and reports of the increasing effect psychologically of this Mandela effect. What I'm saying here is that the AI's deep machine learning in a circular process of the Boltzmann process is having that psychological effect on us. It is actually invading our reality. I'm saying the D-Wave computers, this pollution, quantum information that is coming through is actually affecting us mentally. This is not so much as quantum information affecting the pages and the videotapes and furniture in our house or anything else. It is actually psychologically affecting us because this information is being transmitted. We are fully immersed in an electromagnetic soup, 3G, 4G, and now 5G. Therefore, this full immersion is transmitting this data, this quantum pollution, into our brains at a quantum level and affecting the quantum spin of the quantum particles in our quantum computer brain. So I always try to be very definitive and not make a blanket statement. We're talking about changing the actual direction that quantum particles that are representing either a 0 or representing a 1. It is changing those zeros and ones to a different configuration, a different number. It is affecting the programming of the quantum spin of quantum particles within our brain. Therefore, it is both a psychological in the way that it manifests to us using our senses, using our thought processes, as we consciously are aware of our thinking processes. That's the psychological aspect. The physical aspect, the biological aspect, are the warm and wet qubits in our brains, which are the tubulin dimers, which are zeros and ones. Those tubulin dimers, those warm and wet qubits, are actually being physically reprogrammed. And I use the euphemism of a compass needle. When we talk about quantum spin, think of a compass needle. If it's pointing one direction, it's a 0. If you change the direction of the spin of the needle pointing in a different direction changes it from a 1 to a 0. If you change the numbers, you change the processing, you change the programming, you change the equation, you change the sum of that equation. The sum of the equation we consciously see in our minds as this Mandela effect. I'll give you an example. A friend of mine, she went into her mother's house and there was a chandelier. And she looked at the chandelier and said to her mother, "When did you buy that chandelier?" And her mother thought she was crazy and said, "It's been here for 20 years. And she said, "How can that be? I've never seen this chandelier." And she's been in and out of that house on a daily basis. This is just a personal example I'm giving you. There's thousands out there. Where this is going is that this is ramping up. Now, Kev, I'm going to take a break here and let you talk a little bit about this movie that's coming up about the Mandela effect, and then I'm going to get into it even deeper. Go ahead.
Absolutely. But, just to even add to what you were saying there, it wasn't long ago that myself, you, and Johnny Whistles, he brought up the story about how the brain operates in 11 dimensions. And they say that because these scientists now, because of the billions that have been poured into things like the Big Brain Project, they are literally at the point where they can map which neurons fire off, what kind of connections they make, and then they look at the geometric shape. Now, that is the knowledge, the intrinsic knowledge that they now have of our minds. We've covered before the importance of spin when it comes to quantum. And they really are. This is how Tony's example there, perfect example of how it's not reality, it's changing. It's our personal memories of things. It's our brains that are being changed. And I urge anyone out there, it's a fascinating topic. And it's great to look at what new Mandela effects people are experiencing. And I say people are experiencing it because nothing in reality has changed. It's on an individual level we have been changed. And I want to read out this quote from a famous author. And it says, D-Wave's Boltzmann machine is the core process of the Mandela effect because it is a recurrent neural network process. It is an endless loop. We've discussed it as the new process of deep machine learning. That is only the beginning. This is a spiral, a time loop, but more than a loop because the Mandela effect is spreading and becoming more apparent, even to those who do not know of the Mandela effect label. There's a Mandela effect movie coming out and only serving as further evidence of this. It's all part of the increasing density of data, the granularity of data of the sentient world simulation. In the August issue of Entangled, I'll be comprising a rather lengthy article tying all of this together. The sentient world simulation is moving out of the lab, you might say. It is the final version of the old Model T Project Bluebeam. Sentient world simulation is the holographic, digitized reality. However, this advanced form of hologram is not dependent upon laser projection systems, for only in people's minds does it exist. If a visitor from another planet were to arrive on Earth, it would see the original analog version as God created it, while those Earth inhabitants affected at their DNA, thus their brain level, would see the digital version. This is God's strong delusion. He's allowing Satan to build out this system of densely granular data. God does this all as part of his judgment. Those indwelt of the Holy Spirit will not become fully immersed within the Boltzmann machine-driven delusion. Some will see the changes, recalling the original versions. However, due to the spiraling process of ever-increasing density of data, those without the discerning power of the Holy Spirit will claim no memories of those originals. In conclusion, D-Wave's soon-to-be published white paper on the employment of the Boltzmann machine recurrent neural network of quantum processing units, QPUs, by way of the increasing evidence of instances of the Mandela effect, is proof positive it's been in operation since the first recollections of this event. Compounding the density of granular data is D-Wave's continuous extraction of, quote, resources from near infinite numbers of parallel dimensions, thus serving the spiral model of God's, quote, strong delusion. The spiral, by the way, is a function of the geometric centre of the 600-cell tetrahedron. Now, where have we heard of that before? Once again, proving D-Wave's employment of it in the physical structuring of their 10th model computer. Now, I won't go into any more of that, Tony, because some of that's for the book that's coming out. But there we go. And that famous author, of course, was yourself, sir.
Well, I wasn't planning on the whole thing being read, but I'm glad that you had time to squeeze that in. Thank you.
Definitely. When I read that a couple of times today, Anthony, it really did. It made a lot of sense to me. And you know how I like to picture things in my mind before it can sink in. And I think a lot of the people out there who maybe don't have the physics or scientific background, they'll appreciate the fact that when you can picture this, it's a whole lot easier to understand. And I can only thank you for the way you do break that down like that.
No, I try to be the translator, and that's really my mission, is to translate the arcane science into things that all of us can understand. The spiral I mentioned in there is important because we're seeing more manifestations of the Mandela effect. That means that there is more of this quantum pollution in our environment, and it's becoming denser. And we mentioned very briefly Project Bluebeam. Think of this. Think of the spiral as gathering the quantum pollution as it comes in from literally thousands upon thousands of parallel dimensions. And it's being coalesced. It's being pulled together. It's being concentrated like you would be stirring something and concentrating it into a center point. Now, that spiraling effect is also the same way that the Boltzmann machine takes data and concentrates it down into a center point through that spiraling process of the Boltzmann machine. The relevance of the spiral is that it is concentrating data into this sentient world simulation that is being built. And therefore, what you're doing is you're taking this virtual reality in a computer, and you are actually moving it out of the laboratory, as I wrote there, in the form of, and drum roll please, you are converting data into matter. This is the actual physical revised reality. This is the goal of the sentient world simulation, to be completely around the planet, enveloping the planet from the atmosphere right down to the ground level, and it recreating what we would consider to be the physical, tangible matter or substance of our reality. They are literally getting the density of the data so concentrated that it actually manifests itself as solid matter. And to back that up, there's an article that just came out today in which they're talking about, and actually it's a refreshing information from back in 2016 about holograms that are projecting holographic images that are so dense in their data that you can actually physically reach out and touch these holographic projections, and they feel just like solid matter. That is exactly what is going on completely around the planet with this influx of quantum pollution through D-Wave being concentrated using their own computer system, which is the Boltzmann machine, concentrating data to such an extent that it actually becomes matter. And you do not need a holographic projector to do that. And Project Bluebeam is now another Model T in comparison to what I just described. So Mandela effect has everything to do with the sentient world simulation and the converting of dense granular data to matter. Go ahead, my friend.
I mean, it wasn't that long ago we were talking about Pokemon Go, and this was augmented reality, Tony, right? You would hold up your iPhone, the camera would show you what your camera would normally see, and then these little demonic beasties would be there, right? Are we approaching living in an augmented reality where we'll no longer need the smartphone for digitized characters to be jumping out at us?
Yeah, that's the full immersion. That is the beast system. That is the Internet of Things that they're promoting. This is the interconnecting of literally everything in this new digitized reality that will be manifesting in physical form. Absolutely correct.
And this is exactly the kind of reality, and I use that word loosely now, that they're pushing on us in the sci-fi movies and Hollywood, the B movies as well, because often now, Tony, I shared this with you before the show, but I'm sure some of the listeners out there will have spotted this as well. And it's like almost holographic advertisements. There's things going up and down buildings, and it's all part of this augmented reality. And of course, because of the sensors and the data, all of these advertisements are tailored to you. They know your search history. They know what you've been looking at on your phone. They call you into the shop. They know what you're going to buy. And then the next customer passes, and that augmented reality, that digitized advertisement, it's tailored to them, Tony. It's a crazy world we're moving into.
It is. And just to touch back on Project Bluebeam, because we were talking about disclosure earlier relative to Antarctica, Project Bluebeam really was, it was the foundation. It was the preliminary prototype. What I'm talking about now is all based on hard science. We've seen the articles. They're not hiding anything from us. Kev and I have seen all of this that I just described to you in different articles that have been put out in the public. So if anyone is thinking that this digital reality is not real, that it is not really coming about, just go look at the root of the sentient world simulation. Go to Purdue University, 2006. You'll see their white paper. 2007, SWS went live, and it's concurrent with the progress of the D-Wave computer system models. Each model walks lockstep with the advances in the SWS. They're working together. Therefore, what we're looking at is an advanced form of Project Bluebeam. Forget about the stuff being projected on the atmosphere. That's only a part of it. This is a full immersion in a Project Bluebeam-like scenario. There is no holographic projection in the SWS. This is data pumped into our reality and changing it, and the taste of it, the hint of it, is what we experience right now psychologically as the Mandela effect. It will move to being what we would perceive if we don't have the Holy Spirit. When our DNA changes, we will perceive the data live, and we will see it as matter, even though it does not really exist as matter, but we will perceive it and interact with it with all our senses as if it were absolutely solid material. That's the granularity of the data we're talking about. So Mandela is just the hint of things to come.
Absolutely. And Gene in the chat room, I totally get where you're coming from. I know some of this sounds sci-fi and digitized reality. What on earth's name is that all about? But like I said to you in the chat, Gene, or anyone else out there, myself and Tony, we could come along here and we could just make a totally fictional show up, right? But the way we would do it is we go and we look at their papers that they're talking about, and I can assure you none of what myself and Tony talk about is fiction, unless, of course, these white papers and these really cutting-edge scientists who are working on this, they could be lying, I get that, but really this is the reality that they're taking us into. And, you know, this is only possible now because of the big data that's about, and of course, this advancement in quantum computing. Because, Tony, I don't think even the best of the old supercomputers would have been able to play about with quantum spins. And there in itself, it's not tunneling to other dimensions and bringing back resources. So it's only now that we have the D wave that this is possible.
That's right. And I'm just going to give a teaser for Friday. You and Joe and myself will be together on Friday. We're going to get into this discussion even deeper, but we're also going to launch into how God is going to, and has already started, the transformation. You talk about transformers. Think about the transformation of those with the Holy Spirit, because all of the technology that we talk about, God has already created and is about to launch, and even some small aspects, preliminary aspects of the transformation of his people, not just to meet, but to exceed the technology that we've been talking about. You talk about the technology being miraculous. Well, God already in Scripture, and I'll cite it on Friday, God will be transforming us to perform miracles greater than Jesus Christ. And those are Jesus Christ's own words, that we would perform greater wonders than even he. So that's what we're going to talk about on Friday.
And, you know, maybe some of us who are experiencing these quantum connections like I've formed with Nano and Tony and Joe and Johnny, and everyone else out there, maybe we've just had a early glimpse into the powers that are about to be bestowed upon us. Until tomorrow night, myself and Whistles, and then Friday with Tony. Wherever you are, make it TFR, and dinny touch that dial.
God bless you. What we're going to hear. And lo and behold, guess what we found under the ice? We had no idea it was there, and thus rolls out disclosure.
Absolutely. And for anyone who is just playing catch up on the South Pole woo, we've had the leader of the Caustic Church, I think, from Russia going down there. We've had John Kerry. We've had Buzz Aldrin. A whole heap of important characters going down to the South Pole. And why? And, you know, it could well be that they are going to reveal some secrets from beneath the ice, but never lose sight of the fact that this all ties into a bigger picture, and that will eventually, in their eyes, lead to bringing about a new world order, a global government, Tony, ripping down all the religions as we know them and replacing them with a one world religion, right?
Yeah, and that's pointing to September 23rd, and this has to do with the Vatican and the 500-year Jubilee, the re-reformation of the Protestant and Catholic Church, and also bringing together all of the churches.
This is the Kev Baker Show.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Welcome back. It's time for the Kev Baker Show, right here on Truth Frequency Radio Network. And I'm coming to you live from an undisclosed location in the Highlands of Scotland on a secret mission for KBS. Some sneaky, beaky black op stuff going on. Only joking, it's nothing as exciting as that. But I'm in a mobile command centre tonight, so if I do sound a little different, apologies for that. We'll hopefully be joined by Johnny Whistles momentarily, but don't panic because we have got another info-filled hour of radio for all of you right here on TFR on the Kev Baker Show. And to do this, a good friend and a man hopefully will be with us. And, you know, he's been using my spare mic, Tony. That's what it was, right? And he assured me when I borrowed it to go away that it's okay. Everything's cool. He's got his equipment working. I think he was just trying to make me feel good. So we'll have to have a go at him if he gets back on the show tonight, Tony.
Well, that can of stew,
yeah,
that doesn't cut it for a microphone, my friend. I don't know what kind of game you're playing.
I know. If I do sound different tonight, apologies. But you know KBS, we don't do rebros. And Tony, a very big show tonight. episode number 750. And before we get into all the artificial intelligence information that we've got tonight, this morning I felt compelled to put a video out because sometimes stories come along and you get a gut feeling that there's more to them than meets the eye. And this was a story concerning a 1 trillion-ton ice shelf that is snapped off of Antarctica. It's going to change the landscape forever. We had been warned. Who's becoming the third member of the KBS team, Mr. Anthony Patch. Now, if you're a first-time listener to KBS, Anthony Patch is an author, researcher, and a public speaker. He's the author of a number of books: 2048, Diamonds in the Rough, Covert Catastrophe, Revising Reality, and he's also the editor behind the new project, something we're calling Entangled, e-magazine. You can find all of that, plus all of the work Anthony has done on CERN, quantum computing, all the rest of it, over at anthonypatch.com. And don't forget, you can catch him right here on TFR on a Friday night, 10 p.m. in the UK, right before Freaky Friday. And that's 5 p.m. on the East Coast, 2 p.m. on the West Coast. And without any further ado, let me go to the man himself, Anthony Patch. Welcome back, bro. How you doing?
Hey, very good. Unfortunately, we're missing one of the legs to our stool and we're falling over.
We are. You know, this trident that we've got here, the kind of trinity that works so well. Johnny Whistles horned about this back in June last year, or June this year, sorry. And yeah, this is broken off. But the thing is, the South Pole for over a year now, I would call it a topic of great woo. A lot of mystery down there. We've seen world leaders going down there. And when I seen this today, Anthony, I honestly thought to myself, you know, this could be the starting event, the trigger being pulled on a timed, maybe a false disclosure. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I really enjoyed your presentation on your YouTube channel today discussing this. And I was kind of cheering and banging the top of the table because when you said this could lead to disclosure, I was going, absolutely. It certainly would. Imagine this. They say, oh, global warming. And what was it, a 20 trillion or a 2 trillion ton? What's the size of that? What was the weight of it?
Just 1 trillion ton.
Okay. So it's a big piece of ice.
Huge.
That it broke off because of global warming as well.